Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Jason Cogdell. I'm one of the benefits attorneys at ProBenefits, and I'm here today with my colleague, Chris McCauley, to present our fourth client webinar of the year, an update on Form 5500 reporting for health and welfare plans. We typically do a Form 5500 update every spring in advance of the primary deadline. Calendar year ERISA plans must file 5500s annually by July 31. So while plans that are not on a calendar year basis have deadlines that are spread throughout the plan year, July 31 is kind of the big annual deadline. So we always try to present this webinar as a compliance instructional session in advance of the July 31 calendar year filing deadline in order to help you as employers. So I hope that you'll find the session helpful today. Chris is going to cover a refresher on the basics of 5500 requirements. We're going to cover some scenarios and an important example about how employers have options in the way that they file, and the scenarios that we see as a Form 5500 preparer who files forms for various plan structures and sizes of employers throughout the year. But particularly this time of year, heading into July 31, we want to share some examples and insights that we have so that you know where you stand, and then also the best practices for your organization in terms of the way that you may get in compliance and stay in compliance with ERISA rules. And we'll also cover some common issues and updates as we go. As always, your questions are welcome. You've got two options to submit questions, either through the question box on the control panel, which will come directly to us, and we'll do our best to answer all those questions during the session today, or you can submit them by email, and we'll get back to you. And the best email for questions is christopher@probenefits.com. So thanks for joining us today. Hope you find the session helpful. By word of context, and before Chris gets into a refresher on the basic compliance requirements of Form 5500 reporting for employers, the context is ERISA. ERISA, as we all likely know, is the primary federal law that governs employee benefit plans. And ERISA stands for Employee Retirement Income Security Act. It's a federal law that's been around for 40 years, and it includes several categories of requirements that apply to employee benefit plans: claims and appeals, fiduciary responsibility, the responsibilities of the plan administrator, plan document requirements. ERISA requires that every ERISA plan be administered pursuant to a plan document and a summary plan description, or SPD, that's made available to participants. That those requirements are born out of ERISA. COBRA is part of ERISA, as is HIPAA. But the main disclosure requirement in terms of reporting from the employer plan level to the government, specifically the Department of Labor, is the annual Form 5500. And the Form 5500 is a requirement that every ERISA plan technically has, but some plans are exempt, and Chris will get into that more later. So as we find Form 5500 as a requirement on the big map of employee benefits compliance, it's under ERISA, and it's ERISA disclosure. All ERISA plans must follow the items listed on the screen, but certain ERISA plans must disclose information on an annual basis to the Department of Labor via a form, and that's what the Form 5500 is.
Thanks, Jason, and again, welcome to everyone. I think the first thing we want to do is just jump right into the Form 5500 basics. The first question is, who must file a Form 5500? And the answer is, most employers at least need to consider whether the 5500 requirement applies to their plan. The only full exceptions to ERISA and by extension the Form 5500 is for churches and government entities. So those plans don't even need to consider the 5500 requirement. It doesn't apply to them. All other employers, which is 99% of employers, then need to consider whether the 5500 requirement applies to their plan. And as we'll get into on the following slides, there is a partial exemption for certain health and welfare plans based on plan size. So most plans under 100, most health and welfare plans under 100 participants don't need to file the 5500, but we'll get into that that exemption a little bit more on the following slides. Jason mentioned this briefly in the outline, but the filing deadline for Form 5500s is the last day of the 7th month after the plan year ends. So 2015 calendar year plans that ended on the last day of December in 2015, their 5500s are due to be filed by July 31st of 2016. A plan that ended at the end of January would be due at the end of August. A plan that ended at the end of February would be due at the end of September, and so on. But there is a 2.5-month extension available if you don't think you're going to be able to have your 5500 in time for the deadline. If you file IRS Form 5558, submit that by mail to the DOL prior to the 5500 filing deadline, there is a 2.5-month extension. And again, if you file it before the 5500 deadline, it is automatically granted by the DOL. After we talk about what employers need to consider the 5500 filings and when they need to be filed, let's talk specifically about what plans need to be filed. The rest of this presentation is going to be about health and welfare plans, but I just wanted to point out that retirement plans, 5500s are required for all retirement plans. There is no size exemption, so even if there are 2 participants, a 5500 would be required for the retirement plan. Typically, those are filed by the retirement TPA, so you may not even know that it's being filed on your behalf. If you don't know and you're interested in whether your retirement plan is filing, then I would start by asking your retirement plan TPA whether that's being filed. The rest of the presentation, we're going to talk about health and welfare plans. As I noted briefly on the previous slide, there are exemptions for small unfunded plans or small insured plans with less than 100 employee participants on the first day of the plan year. So you look at the first day of the plan year, look at how many employee participants there are, and if there are under 100 and you have an insured plan or an unfunded plan, then you do not need to file a 5500 for that plan year. Just to say that another way, the only plans that are required to file the 5500 are those that are funded by a formal trust or plans that have 100 or more participants on the first day of the plan year. As we move to the next slide, I just wanted to put up a list of plans that are governed by ERISA. All of these benefits are ERISA benefits, and potentially, unless an exemption applies, they need to be filed as part of a 5500 filing, either on their own or as part of a consolidated plan. So I just wanted to put up the full list, not a full list, but some examples of ERISA plans so that you can see them. We're not going to walk through all of them. Obviously, the ones at the top are the ones we're most familiar with, health, dental, and vision. But I think the most important thing is to just take a note of some of the other ERISA plans that are not as prevalent or might not come to you to think that they are ERISA plans and that potentially a 5500 needs to be filed, such as health FSA or HRAs, certain wellness plans, employee assistance programs, or medical clinics if medical benefits are provided, and then some of the lesser provided plans below business travel accident or hospital indemnity coverage. So it's important to think about all the benefits you have and question whether ERISA applies or not. With that, Jason, I think you're going to pull up a sample 5500 to show everyone.
Yes, I thought everyone might like to see a sample 5500 if you haven't looked at one. Some of you review these annually, either prepared by us or prepared elsewhere, so you're familiar with the general format of the Form 5500. But if you're not used to it, I thought you might like to see one. So this is the Form 5500 for the calendar year 2014, filed last year, for everybody's favorite Cupertino, California employer, Apple Inc. This 5500 is a little longer than most filings. This one's 55 pages. Most of them are much shorter. Obviously, Apple's a very large company with somewhere in the range of 100,000 employees, so they've got a lot of different benefit plans in different states. That's one reason this one is lengthy. But what's important is that this is pretty common for a consolidated wrap filing, a company that files one Form 5500 under one plan number, in this case Plan 510 as listed over here in Section 1B. Plan 510, it's on a calendar year basis as listed up here at the top of Part 1, and you'll see 2014's the heading on the tax form. The plan is called Apple Inc. Health and Welfare Benefit Plan, so this includes all of Apple's non-retirement plans under one plan name, one plan number. The first 2 pages of the Form 5500 are just the base tax form. You see the electronic filing authorization at the bottom. This one was filed July 27th, 2015, 4 days before the deadline. And as we go to page 2, you'll see that there are participant counts for the plans. In this case, the number of active participants at the end of the plan year was 66,000, which is obviously a big number. Down at the bottom, as we get to Section 8, there are codes for which specific plans are sponsored by Apple and included in this filing. And then Section 9 includes the funding. Most all of us have insurance plans, fully insured plans, but some of us sponsor self-funded plans. In this case, Apple has not only fully insured plans, as checked line 1 under Section 9A, but also it has multiple self-funded plans for medical and dental, and so there are plans that are funded by general assets. So the base Form 5500 is 2 pages, which is the same for everyone. Page 3, Part 3, is a Form M-1 compliance question, and this relates to whether or not the plan is part of a MIWA, a multiple employer welfare arrangement. In this case, the answer is no. The answer is no for most of us, most employer filings, but we have to certify that. And then everything else in the filing is made up of schedules. Schedule A for fully insured plans, Schedule C for large self-funded plans, and there's some specific financial schedules that go along also with large financial plans that are funded by a trust. We're not going to look at all of these schedules, but I'm going to look at one of them. Those of you that have fully insured plans know that either you or your insurance broker get annually a document from the insurance carrier, typically labeled Schedule A, but really it's not the Schedule A, it's just the information that goes on the Schedule A. This is the real Schedule A, in this case for Cigna Health and Life Insurance Company, which is the carrier for medical and dental plans that Apple sponsors. But the information from the insurance carrier is taken and then used to populate these formal Schedule A's that go along with the Form 5500, one for each carrier. And there could be one for each specific benefit, or if it's one carrier but multiple benefits, as here with Cigna, because as we flip over, we'll see that this is for health and dental that Cigna administers for Apple. So in this case, we see Cigna's information, tax ID number, National Association of Insurance Commissioner code, the contract number, the number of individuals covered, 66,000, the plan year. Typically, we'll see insurance commissions that are paid to the broker or fees paid listed. They're not listed here, probably because Apple has a unique contract situation in the way that they pay their insurance representatives. But this Schedule A is 4 pages and includes all of the relevant information that applies to the Cigna plans for Apple, and they're Schedule A's for all of Apple's different carriers. So I won't go through all those, but just want to show you that briefly for those of you that are not familiar with what the form is. So you can imagine the mechanics of the filing are, getting the employer's information, getting the carrier information, confirming participant counts, and then making sure everything is done correctly. That's generally what the Form 5500 process is. That's what we do for employers. Some employers do it themselves. Some use a CPA, but that's the general process based on what the form looks like. Chris?
Thanks, Jason. The next thing I want to talk about is what filing structure should be used for the benefits. I kind of often refer to this as the filing strategy. Essentially, we talked about a couple slides before about all the potential ERISA benefits, so there's a question as to whether each benefit needs its own 5500. And the default is that yes, the DOL considers each ERISA plan, each ERISA benefit to be its own ERISA plan. And so each plan needs to be filed separately. So 15500 would need to be filed for the medical plan. If you 15500 would need to be filed for the dental plan, the vision plan, the life, and so on. And so that is the default. In absence of a wrap document, each plan is filed separately. The plan does have the option to consolidate all of the benefits into a single ERISA plan. In order to do that, the plan needs to adopt a consolidated wrap SPD that per ERISA plan document rules, which brings in all of the benefits into one single ERISA plan. And so with the wrap plan, multiple benefits could use one plan number, say 501, as opposed to the default, which would use 501, 502, 503, etc. And we're going to talk about a couple of examples and walk through that a little more on the next slides. So this is the default. In the absence of a wrap SPD, this is how the benefits would be filed. So a company sponsors 6 ERISA plans: health, dental, life, short-term disability, long-term disability, and a health FSA. All the plans are a June 1 plan year and have 100 or more participants. So all of the benefits need a 5500 because there are 100 or more participants. Health and dental have separate carriers: life, short-term disability, long-term disability. They're all with one carrier. So the default is to file individual 5500s, one for each ERISA plan. Because of the June 1 plan year, the filing would be due December 31st. And then down below is the filing strategy that would apply. One thing we didn't talk about, or I didn't mention in the default, even without a wrap document, benefits under the same carrier contract could be filed together. So the filing strategy in this scenario would be Plan 501 Medical would need its own 5500. Plan 502 Dental would need its own 5500. Plan 503 Life and Disability couldn't be combined into one 5500 because life and the disability plans were with the same carrier. And then finally, Plan 504, Health FSA, would also require its own 5500. And I know we had a question that asked about how the plan numbers are determined, and really it's sort of just industry standard. Health and welfare benefit plans normally start with Plan 501, and the industry standard is really just to, because it's easiest, because it's the most important, sort of to just make medical plan 501 and then go on from there. Dental 502, life, disability 503. These are not, those specific numbers are not requirements, but we start with 501 and you can apply any of those numbers to the benefits that you offer. So again, this is the default example of no wrap document, how the plans would be filed. There would be 4 5500s required for these 6 ERISA plans. On the next slide, I think we're going to take a look at the example of a consolidated wrap SPD that's been adopted. So Acme Inc., our employer, has consolidated all of their benefits into a wrap SPD. So they've had a wrap SPD drafted, they've adopted it, and all of the benefits have combined in the document into one single plan name, one single plan number, one single SPD. So that would mean only one 5500 would be necessary. And that could be Plan 501, Acme Inc. Health and Welfare Benefits Plan. Now importantly, The schedules for all of those benefits would still need to be included in the filing, but there would only be one base Form 5500. So just like Apple's, which we've showed the example, there was one base 5500, and then there were schedules for each of the benefits that applied that were part of the plan. So this is the alternative option. Sometimes it's just easier administratively to think about one plan number, one SPD, and one 5500 filing. So that's sort of why the consolidated wrap SPD is adopted and how it affects 5500 filings. With that, Jason, maybe you want to show a sample wrap SPD, and I talked about the SPD's purpose for 5500 filings. You might also want to talk about its other purpose, which is to serve as an ERISA SPD.
We thought you all might like to see a wrap document. Some of you have a document like this. You know, the default summary plan description for an insurance plan, if nothing else has been adopted, is the participant booklet. So if you haven't your organization hasn't implemented a wrap, you're just defaulting to the insurance booklet, and you're defaulting to separate ERISA plans, medical, dental, vision, life, disability, etc., with the SPD being the insurance booklet. And if Form 5500s are required for one or more of those plans, that they must be filed separately. For employers who want to file one 5500, have one formal SPD for their plan, the wrap SPD is the document. This is a sample. This sample is actually one of ours. We have a wrap SPD service. We call it the advanced template, but it's a formal legal document that Chris and I have drafted and updated, and it's designed to help an employer merge multiple benefit plans. In this example, Acme Inc., for the Acme Inc. Health and Welfare Benefits Plan, similar to the Apple example, Acme is consolidating 6 plans: medical, dental, life and AD&D, short-term disability, long-term disability, and a health FSA. And so Acme Inc. needs a legal document. This is the legal document that consolidates those plans and allows Acme Inc. to keep a single SPD and file a single Form 5500 for its plan 501 in this case, as you see on the screen. So we got plan name, the employer information, the plan number, the plan administrator, because one of the values of the wrap SPD is to fill in the gaps. And anything that the insurance booklets do not include that ERISA requires, and they're typically, you know, at least a few items, the wrap SPD would include it. So we've listed the plan administrator. And then importantly, each of the insurance carriers is listed. In this case, Blue Cross Blue Shield of North Carolina for medical, MetLife for dental, life, STD, LTD. And then, of course, America's Best Health FSA administrator, ProBenefits, administering the flexible spending accounts for Acme Inc. So the benefits are listed, and importantly, this is only a 9-page document. This is not a 100-page legal document full of legalese. This is a very simple document written in straightforward terms to stand on top of the insurance booklet. So this document incorporates the insurance booklets of Blue Cross and MetLife, incorporates the SPD that ProBenefits has provided to Acme Inc., and for formal legal purposes pulls those documents together to be a single legal document, a single summary plan description. So what Acme Inc. should do is to make sure this document is updated, includes all of the ERISA plans. I'm just scrolling through the document now. The plan year is July 1 through June 30th. Specific eligibility information listed, specific premium payment information, termination details, leave of absence policy. In the interest of time, I won't reference all these paragraphs, but you'll see a lot of standard language about claims and appeals and COBRA and that type of thing. And then at the end, the document is signed as an updated, compliant legal document, should be by an authorized representative of Acme Inc. But in this case, Acme Inc. wants to make sure that they've got a wrap document in place, that includes all of the ERISA plans, and that it is consistent with the Form 5500. As an example, if an employer is filing a single Form 5500, then the employer has to have a wrap SPD that has the same plan name and plan number and formalizes that they've only got one ERISA plan. If the employer does not have a wrap SPD, then they should not file a single Form 5500. They should file separately with separate ERISA benefits, one 5500 for each. The consolidated wrap SPD is not a legal requirement. it's a common practice, and some may say a best practice for both ERISA compliance and Form 5500 reporting. But this is just a sample, and if you're interested in seeing a sample in more detail, we'll be happy to share that with you.
Next thing I want to talk about is just a couple of common compliance issues or mistakes with 5500 filings. By far the most common mistake for 5500 filing purpose is simply omitting a schedule or not filing a 5500 for a particular benefit. I think the most common scenario is maybe you have looked at whether you have to file a 5500 5 years ago, and you only had 80 employees, and you said, oh, I don't need to file the 5500. I'm under 100 employee participants on the first day of the plan year, so I don't need to file. And I only have 80 employees, so I probably don't have to worry about this for a while. Well, maybe in the last 5 years you've grown significantly. You've gone over 100 on the first day of one of the recent plan years, but you forgot about the 5500 filing requirement, so you didn't file with the DOL. That's the most common mistake, a plan that's over 100 participants that's required to file but just fails to do so. Some other common mistakes are filing late without having filed an extension. A late filing generally is not fully compliant unless a penalty is paid for that late filing, which we'll talk about the delinquent filer program in a couple of slides. And then another common mistake is what Jason talked about when looking at the SPD, is filing a single 5500 without having a consolidated wrap SPD in place. So you want to make sure that your plan documents match the way you file your 5500 forms. The consequences for non-compliance, the statutory consequences are fairly severe. Any 5500 not filed by the deadline is subject to a penalty up to $1,100 per day, and that penalty would theoretically apply to each of the ERISA benefits. So it could, if you have 5 different ERISA plans, potentially that penalty applies to each plan. It's a very harsh penalty. Generally, even if audited by the DOL would not assess that statutory penalty. They do have the discretion to assess a lower penalty, but still the penalty they assessed would likely be significant. And again, if you have delinquent filings, if you have not filed for several years a 5500 form that should have been filed, you can file through the DOL's delinquent filer program, which we'll talk about in a couple slides, and pay reduced penalties. I'm not going to go through this whole slide. Jason talked a lot about it, about the process when he was looking at the 5500 for Apple, but just know that all the filings are done on the DOL's EFAS2 online database. So you're not able to mail in the filings. It's all done on the database. We can go ahead and move to the next slide. This is EFAS. One thing I do want to show, and I think would be helpful to you, is you can look at your filings on EFAS2 on the DOL's website. So you can go to their website, which is shown here, and you can search for, if you want to know whether you have filed in the past, or you can click the Form 5500 search button where the green arrow is pointing, and once you do that, it will take you to a search page where you can type in the name of your employer or the name of your plan, or you can search by tax ID. Sometimes tax ID is the best. It's not always when you type in the plan sponsor does the plan pop up, but then you'll type in the plan ID number or the tax ID number, and you'll see all the plans. And you'll see here we searched for Microsoft, and you can look at all of their 5500 filings. This is public. All this information is in the public record, so you don't need a login or sign in or anything to see this information. So we can see here that Microsoft has filed for their 401k plan in the past. Those are the first 4 plans, plan number 001. And then you can see down below plan plan number's 501, they also have a consolidated welfare plan that they've been filing. And if you scroll, we can't do it on the screen here, but if you scrolled over to the right, it would also show the plan years that these filings are for and the date that they were submitted to the DOL. So if you're an advisor and you want to know whether the plans you're advising have filed in the past, then this may be a helpful tool for you. Or if you're an employer and you're not sure whether you have been complying with the 5500 filing, just go to the Department of Labor's eFast2 website and you can do this search. One final aspect of the 5500 is the summary annual report. I'm not going to go into too much detail about the SAR, but all it is a summary of the 5500 form that is distributed to plan participants. So plan participants get a summary of the 5500 that was filed. For 5500 forms that we prepare, we also prepare the SAR and provide it to the employer to distribute to their employees. So that SAR must be distributed within 9 months of the end of the plan year. So after you file the 5500, you generate the SAR, or you get the SAR from ProBenefits if we prepare the forms, and you go ahead and distribute it to plan participants. This is a slide where I want to talk about the delinquent filer program. Again, we talked about the harsh penalties for failing to file 5500s. The delinquent filer voluntary compliance program essentially allows employers to hold up their hands, tell the DOL, we were late, we realized we're late, and we're to file all of those delinquent filings now that should have been filed in the past, and because we're turning ourselves in, we can pay a lower penalty. And those penalties are capped, they're set in advance. It's capped at $10 per day of non-compliance. If it's less than a year delinquent, then that penalty is capped at the lesser of $10 per day or $2,000. And then if it's more than 1 year delinquent, then that max penalty is $4,000. And that's $4,000 per ERISA plan. So going back to the default scenario where each plan is its own ERISA plan, potentially that penalty could apply to all of those plans. But this is an effective solution for employers that have missed past filings. We help many employers in this scenario, and it's just a way to get rid of all compliance risk and pay a lower penalty than could potentially be assessed in the case of a DOL audit.
Chris, in the interest of time, we can skip the last few slides. Folks, we are going to provide you a copy of the slides and the recording. Before we finish, Chris, a couple of questions. You mentioned the one about ERISA plan numbers earlier. One question submitted by several participants was, what do you recommend, or what are our options if we have some plans either with different benefit years? So for instance, the medical benefit year may be different than the life benefit year, or if we have a scenario where we renew the plan on a different basis than the actual benefit is. What do you recommend in terms of setting a plan year, let's just say for an employer that wants to do a consolidated wrap and file 15500 for all benefits?
Yeah, that's a good question. The first thing to note is that the ERISA plan year, or the plan year that you're using for 5500 purposes, doesn't necessarily have to match the renewal date when employees can renew their benefits through the carrier. So there is some flexibility in terms of setting the ERISA plan year. If there are multiple benefits with multiple plan years, I think a wrap SPD that sort of picks one ERISA plan year would be the way to go. That way you can file all the benefits at one time. You don't have to worry about multiple deadlines. So I think that's just one important thing to note, is that the ERISA plan year doesn't necessarily have to match the renewal for the component benefits. What I would look to, if you do have multiple benefits and multiple documents, I would look at your plan documents to see what's listed in those documents as the plan year, because generally that's what the plan year, that's the plan year that would be used for 5500 filing purposes. So I think that the thing in that scenario is just see what the plan documents say. If you have different deadlines, you may want to consider a document or a consolidated SPD that aligns all the benefits on the same ERISA plan year to use for 5500 purposes.
Last question, and just to confirm, those of you that have submitted questions, I think we've answered all of those. You're welcome to submit now or after the session, either through the question box or by email. Last question for you, Chris. Example, I have a company, we've got 125 full-time employees. We offer let's just say the same 6 benefits that Acme Inc. did in the example. Every full-time employee has the group the group term life insurance. So 125 participants in the group term life insurance. Also, everyone has short-term disability. But the plans that require employee contribution, including medical and dental, are less than 100. If we consolidate all our plans into a wrap, are we going to have to file for medical and dental even though they're not 100 participants?
Yes, and that's in the scenario that there's a consolidated wrap SPD. If any of the benefits, if you are required to file for any of the benefits, so in this case, disability and life, you're required to file because it's over 100 participants. If the medical and dental plan are also included in the consolidated wrap, then those schedules also need to be included in the 5500 filing. So when a plan is consolidated into a single plan, all of the benefits are included in the 5500 filing, even if some of the benefits have less than 100 participants.
Thanks, Chris. Again, any questions are welcome. As we conclude, I want to thank you all for attending today. If we can assist you with Form 5500 or ERISA compliance, please let us know. We have a team of 4 skilled individuals, at least 3 skilled individuals plus me, working on Form 5500 prep. But Chris and I, from the compliance standpoint and doing an ERISA analysis and working with employers and advisors, Kelly Turner and Jesse Lawson are on the tech side of things in preparing the forms. The system is very automated and high-tech, and we feel like we do a great job for employers for a very economical fee. We're doing this right now for hundreds of employers all over the country. So we welcome the opportunity to work with you on that. If there's anything we can do in terms of providing resources for you on 5500s or wrap SPDs and ERISA, we'll be happy to do so. Thanks for your time today. Best wishes for a great rest of the day. We'll talk to you soon.